we had at Christmas we had a big tree, and I can remember Wade and I sitting. You know, we were in the younger grades, and I think we must have sat at the same place and getting some of the popcorn off of it. You know, because it was you decorated with popcorn and paper chains and that sort of thing. You know, didn't have lights. There wasn't any electricity in the building, so I guess they used lanterns or something. I can't remember. See, it wasn't important to me because we didn't have electricity either, so I don't recall that. We walked home from school most of the time, and Don would get in some wrestling matches with some people, and I just couldn't understand it. I just cried. I thought he's going to get hurt. But he was just a boy, you know.
Did you have a bicycle to ride?
Never rode a bicycle in my life. No. Wade had a wagon, but no, we didn't have it. We never had a bicycle. Wouldn't have been a good road anyhow. It was not a good road to ride on a bicycle.
So you graduated from high school. Talk about your time after high school. Where did you go after high school, and what did you do kind of in that period?
Well, I graduated from high school in 1939. There was 50 in our class. That was the largest class that ever graduated from Republic. The reason, when I was a freshman, it was the first year that we had free buses. And so we always rode the bus to school. I went to Teachers College then. It was MSU now, but I didn't. I just went 6 months, and the first 3 months, the terms were 3 months. The tuition was $25, and I stayed. Louise and I stayed in a house where a lady kept students, and we could use her kitchen to cook and so on. So that was the first 3 months, and then the next 3 months I stayed and worked from a room and board, which I did not enjoy. But I watched after our little girl because her mother was working. I didn't like it because I couldn't go home and so on. So I only went there 6 months. After that, I got a job at Producer's Creamy. They called it in the laboratory, but what we really did was more clean the things that they used to test the milk, and then we wrap butter, and that was at that time on just off of Grant, on close to Tampa and Grant. And I don't know how I worked there. I don't know how long I worked there, but until I got married, I worked there. Made $25. I brought home $25 a week. Plus, we bought bonds in because that's during the war.
So you mentioned you got married. Let's go backwards and talk about how you met Buck and where you met Buck and what you and Buck did as young people.
Well, I always give him trouble. He grew up in Pleasant, Kansas. He had lived in Springfield and went to first grade in Springfield, and his dad was a policeman. But his parents moved to Pleasant, Kansas because his father's parents had a restaurant there, and they moved there. And I don't know, I guess they must have moved between the second and first grade because he said he just went to first grade to duty school. And he was born in 1918, December 12th, 1918. But he was born in Greene County. His father was a hired hand for Burt Jones, which a lot of people would know. And that's where he was born, of course, at home. I met him, and I always give him trouble over this. It was the 1939, I guess, in the fall. And he had come to Missouri. His aunt and uncle, Elsie and Jim Dillon, had brought him here to live with them because he didn't have a job in Kansas, and this was hard times, you know. And we had this Sellers Cafe, which all the kids went to because they were so nice to you. And he was in there with his cousin Max Britton, and Max introduced me to him. Well, of course, I never saw him or anything. And then the next summer, he had become friends with the Cox brothers, Roy and Clifford and Adrian, which they called him Heavy. And Heavy's girlfriend was Beth Snyder, and she was a good friend of mine, and they fixed us up together. And that was June 15th, 1940.
Where did you go the first
I
day?
can't remember. I don't even remember. But he had a rumble seat, and we rode in the rumble seat. And that was fun. There wasn't much to do. We did go. There was a theater in Republic. We go there. There wasn't a lot to do. You know, I can't really tell you. It wasn't much to do. But he drove a school bus for his uncle.
Can you tell me some of the things you remember thinking about this young man when you were dating him?
Oh, I don't know. I think I just thought he was probably the right one, and I think he felt the same way. But there wasn't much money, and he worked. He helped build Camp Crowder. He worked to help build Fort Leonard Wood. He didn't pass the. He was the 4F, and he couldn't join the service, so he worked there. He helped build the highway from Republic to Springfield. And then in 1942, he went to Bermuda to help build a naval base there, and he was over there quite a while. So then, right after he come home, we were married, and December 24th, 1942.
Tell me a little bit about your first home with Buck.
Well, we went to Kansas City. When we rode the train to see his mother. You know, we could ride the train to Pleasant and visit his mother. We went on to Kansas City and stayed with his aunt and uncle, which they were up there, Elsie and Jim Dillon. And he applied and got a job with North American Aviation, building B-25s. And we lived in a terrible little apartment. I was scared to death, and he really was for me too. But he worked nights, and he had to sleep days. And then one of the Cox boys, Clifford, was drafted, and he and his wife had a small apartment, and it was 3726 Virginia in Kansas City. It apparently, when it was built, it was probably meant for a bedroom, a little sitting room, and had a closet. Well, these people had made it into a little apartment, and that's where we lived. It was small, but plenty. We slept on a pull-out couch, and it was plenty for us. And he worked nights.
Do you remember how much rent you paid?
No, I don't. I wish I did. I'm sure it wasn't much because he didn't make all that much money.
What's the next step in your life after working at that job building those airplanes? What was next?
Well, let me finish about the first part of that. He did quite well there, and he was the lead man and so on, and he was really a mechanic, a wonderful mechanic. And before the war was over, they were training them to work on jets, because B-25s were not jets. And he had professors from University of Kansas that taught him. You know, it was a very interesting job. But then when the war was over, we moved down here. But I need to go back and tell you about Kathy, because she was one when we lived up there. Uh, we we She was born in February 1944, and I came down here and stayed before she was born, and she was born here in Springfield at the Osteopath Hospital. We were going to Dr. Mitchell at Republic was an osteopath, and he delivered her. And I stayed with Mom and Dad. And it so happened that Buck was down for the weekend, and she was born. You know, he happened to be here when she was born. So that was quite an experience because I didn't know what to do with her. And you don't. You don't know what to do with these kids.
So you came down here to have Kathy.
Yeah, and then when she was 5 weeks old, I went back to Kansas City. And we weren't, they didn't want children where we were living, and we finally found a place over on Gladstone in the north part of Kansas City, Missouri. And this lady was renting her house. Her husband was in the service, and she rented her house. And we lived there till the end of the war. And of course, when the war ended, his job ended. He was offered a job with, what's the airline? I don't think it even exists now. But it was shift work, and he didn't want to do it. So we came down here and found a little house to rent just east of town that belonged to the Big Laneys. I can't think of the name of that street that it goes now, but anyway, it's just east of town. And it was quite, I don't think there was any insulation. It was quite a house. But then shortly after we moved down here, then Juanita was born. She was born December the 21st, 1945.
Now, were you working?
No.
Where was Buck working?
Well, when he first came, he got a job with John Arrington, who had a garage, and he was going to do mechanic work for him. Then he applied at Ozark Airlines, and they would have hired him, but they kept, it was, and then he applied at Camel 66, and that's where he ended up working, was Camel 66 Express. And he worked there till he was 65.
What did he do at Campbell 66?
Well, first he was a mechanic, and then after several years he became shop superintendent, and he was shop superintendent for several years. And he loved his work, he loved his job.